Welcome to Where Are You? A look that recenters us. Today there are almost no words. It is Holy Saturday, a day of great silence and a day when the church does not proclaim the gospel because the word seems silent. Between the cross and the light, what remains is waiting and a certain hope that Sunday will come. Today we are joined by Friar Jesse Meer, student of theology. Jesse, welcome. How are you? From where are you joining us this Holy Saturday?
Um, on this Holy Saturday, I find myself waiting, but not in vain.
Good.
I've learned God has proven himself faithful.
Good. So, to start with this conversation, we're going to listen to a reading. Today, the church doesn't proclaim the gospel, but within this silence, an ancient homily is proclaimed in the office of readings. So, we're going to listen to it together. What is happening today? A great silence covers the earth, a great silence and a great stillness. A great silence because the king sleeps. The earth trembles and is still, because God has fallen asleep in the flesh, and has raised up all who have slept since the beginning. He has gone to search for Adam, our first father, as for a lost sheep. He desires to visit those who live in darkness and in the shadow of death. He who is God and his Son goes to free Adam and Eve from their suffering. Awake, you who sleep, for I did not create you to remain a prisoner in the abyss. Rise from the dead, for I am the life of the dead. So, in this text, we speak of silence, but this silence isn't empty. How do you understand this silence of God?
Um, for me, God's silence is not an ending, but rather an invitation. It forces me to slow down and really face myself. In the noise, I can hide, but in silence, I cannot. I begin to see not just who I think I am, but who I really am. And even though that's not always comfortable, that's where purification begins. The purification of my intentions, my desires, even my motivations. So the silence of God becomes a space where truth happens.
So, in this silence that we're talking about, today the church contemplates Christ descending into the depths. What do you think it means that God enters even into death?
What consoles me is this, that God is not distant from my suffering. He enters into it. He knows what it means to be in the dark, to feel the weight of pain. So when I experience my lowest moments, I don't speak to a God who is unfamiliar with them. I speak to a God who has been there. And because of that, I trust that He will not abandon me. If He can enter death, then He can meet me anywhere.
So, in the midst of suffering and waiting, how do we live in a waiting that offers no immediate answers?
For me, that kind of waiting is waiting that, and honestly, that's hard. I want answers, I want clarity, but Holy Saturday doesn't give that. Instead, it teaches me to let go, to trust that God sees what I cannot, and to finally say, Lord, I surrender. You lead.
So, St. Augustine speaks of the restless heart. What do you think happens to the heart when everything seems silent?
Mm. As our Holy Father, St. Augustine, would say, that our heart is restless until it rests in God. But this restlessness is not always anxiety. Sometimes it's longing, a deep, quiet longing that stretches the heart toward Him. And in the silence, that longing becomes clearer. It reminds me that I was made for more than what I can see now. So even restlessness becomes a kind of prayer itself.
So, for someone who maybe might be feeling this restlessness, who feels the absence, the emptiness, or even thinks that God is silent, what do you think this day can say to them?
For those experiencing darkness, there are moments when the darkness feels too much, when God seems silent or even absent. And in those moments, it's hard to hold on. But sometimes the first step simply is to remember, to look back and see how God has carried you before. And when you cannot remember, that's where others come in. People who remind you of God's love. Because sometimes God's presence comes through the people who refuse to leave you.
Yeah, I think that's really important, learning to lean on others. So, today, while we stand between the cross and the resurrection, what do you think is learned in that in between?
Between the cross and the light, this space in between is actually where many of us actually find themselves in, not in clear suffering, not in clear joy, but somewhere in the middle. And it can feel uncertain, even uncomfortable. But this is where faith becomes real, because here we choose to trust without seeing. We hold on even without immediate answers. And slowly we discover that God is already present. We just don't see him. That's why, even before the light fully breaks in, we trust and have faith that God is already there.
Yeah, I think that's the key, knowing and having that certainty that even though we're not in the light yet, the light is there and God is here with us. So even though
Yes.
today there are not definite answers, there's silence, there's waiting, but there's also a promise that has not yet broken forth, but is already alive, because God also dwells in the night. So, Jesse, thank you for helping us remain in this day of waiting and hope.
Thank you also, Natalia, for having me today.
In the midst of this silence, the question remains, where are you? And we will meet again in the light of Easter.